my personal view is that it may be that there's a crisis of trust in politics in the West that is greater than anything we have experienced since the revolutions in Europe in 1848. Almost the most important thing, one of the two or three most important things for a democratic society to operate properly is citizen efficacy. The idea that there is some little thing that I can do that could have some little effect on pushing forward my values, pushing forward my interests. And with many of the center-left consensus political situations after the Second World War, there was the feeling that was reality. I think that still is reality in some countries. But broadly, it seems to me in the West, this idea has slipped. So I think that very large minorities, or maybe very small majorities, in very many Western states feel that nothing that they do makes a difference. And worse, they seem to have lost the sense of what it even means to be in a situation where something you can do makes a difference.
There's nothing to repeat.
And of course, when you say particularly interesting things, Siri thinks that it must join the conversation. So the loss of any sense of leverage, and even the loss of a sense of what it's like to have leverage. I suppose what I'm saying is that these small majorities or big minorities in the West are at risk of no longer believing in democracy. And I want to say that two things fall out of this that I'll mention now. One is a kind of way of acting that falls outside of the bounds of cause and effect. A kind of acting that falls outside of the bounds of agency. This is what the philosopher Charles Taylor calls magical thinking. In other words, the claim would be that very many people who voted for Trump did not vote for Trump with a mechanism in mind of how he would do some of the things he was going to do. It is no longer the case that we think that there is a certain account of agency that we can give when we cast a vote. In other words, who's going to do what, how, and when, and by what means, and so on. The second thing is a kind of resentment. So there is resentment of the elites, but there is something else. There's resentment of outsiders. There is resentment of real outsiders, and there's resentment of notional outsiders. You know, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking of Hillary Clinton's book, and I've got stuck halfway through reading her book, and one of the reasons I got stuck is because of this point about resentment, and resentment toward the elites, but also resentment toward outsiders. I think that one of the challenges I have with her book is that she does not understand that for millions of Americans, she's evil. This is very important. Not politically disagreeable, but evil. Now, how does this work? I feel hard done by, and I feel unheard. And then there is this talk of all of these outsiders coming into my society already. Outsiders who are already here. That seems to me like it could constitute a threat. And then these elites are telling me to be nice to these outsiders. And then a couple of people who we would call demagogues come along and point us out. They say, well, look at these elites. They're telling you to be nice to these outsiders, and you know what's happening. They prioritize these outsiders over you. And very swiftly we move toward a situation where Hillary is not something you don't want politically for many millions of them. I'm not expressing my own view, by the way. Not just something you don't want, millions of Americans, but something that is very bad. She's a very bad person. And that's a level of resentment that's very difficult to disentangle. So there we go. Final remark. My sense is that we don't know what will happen, But we're coming out of a period of some decades that's in the West quite a successful period. A period where we were challenging the nation state and looking to, if not global institutions, then continent-wide institutions to help us make the world better. And we believed in many things like democracy and human rights. And it seems to me that this very successful period is over. It's irreversibly over, and nothing could possibly bring it back. And it seems to me that very few people understand that. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't make the best of the future, we can't make it better than it is, but it's very important that we're transferring now to a different epoch, to a different era, and we can make that go as well as it possibly can. But what we've had before is done, such that talking about the same issues in the way we would talk about them 5 years ago is no longer possible. And that remains the same whether you replace Trump by somebody you rather like, whether you get back into the European Union if that's what you want. In the big scheme of things, there is no set of actions we can take to return to this period. I think that that period is done.